Now on BBC One, are you still good enough to drive? John Cuthill investigates for Inside Out.
Hello and welcome to Inside Out from the New Forest Pony Sales here at Bewley Road. Here's what's coming up tonight. As prices of New Forest ponies plummet, we'll be finding out about plans to ensure their future.
If they really don't like him, I'm afraid, he might not be a colt by the end of next week.
Richard Westcott looks to the future of a different sort of horsepower as a new report suggests we're falling out of love with the car. But first tonight, statistically, older drivers may be safer, but how do you know if you're too old to drive?
My son Neil was a lovely young man. He's very conscientious, very close to his family, his brothers. And he had so many plans and hopes for the future.
March last year, and 28-year-old Neil Colquhoun from Hampshire was with colleagues celebrating his first few weeks of a new job.
One of the girls, she wanted to go back to her car, and my son, being the gentleman that he was, I used to like to think he was a gentleman anyway, he escorted her back to her car. And he was going to go back to where the others were, and then he thought better of it. So he texted his flatmate and said, put the pizza on, get the beers out. He said, I'm coming home now.
But Neil was never to make it home. His route back took him along the A30 dual carriageway. During the journey, Neil safely overtook a BMW. All of a sudden, he was confronted by a car travelling the wrong way down the carriageway. The two cars smashed together in a head-on collision.
I was banging on my bedroom door, and I woke up, and it's my son saying, there's a policeman downstairs to speak with you. He said, I'm afraid there's been an accident.
It's pretty much head-on. Neil's vehicle span round, collided with the car that he was overtaking as well, and then the three cars have ended up in a sort of heap in the side of the road. His vehicle caught fire shortly after the collision, and many witnesses and people who have turned up to the accident afterwards did their best in an attempt to get Neil out of the vehicle. It would have been an absolutely traumatic scene to come across. There were flames, there was smoke.
The driver of the other vehicle was 89-year-old Dr. Turner Waddell. Badly injured, he and his wife were pulled away from their vehicle, but Neil remained trapped in his car.
And of course the fire, the car caught light. And there was nothing left to identify my son. All that they could offer me was his burnt mobile, which was just melted plastic. You put on the face of people. You laugh and you joke. But inside, you're just breaking up.
The tragic part of this crash was that it could have been completely avoided, as Waddell was not fit to drive.
On the day of the collision and subsequent investigations, we found that, in fact, he had no sight in one eye and below the legal limit in the other. Therefore, he could hardly see where he was going when he was driving along the road.
Dr. Turner Waddell received a 9-month suspended sentence after admitting causing death by careless driving. The judge urged family members of elderly drivers to think very, very carefully whether their relatives should still be on the road. Dr. Waddell's son Tony did try and stop his father from driving, but he couldn't convince him.
I feel of guilt that we could have done something, but in hindsight, in fact, we know we couldn't have done. We give advice, I give advice, and he listened, but he wouldn't really take it in. We used the bus. I even took them on the bus and said, look, it's so easy. doing shopping out, and but no, he, you know, it's probably arrogance. As you get older, we all think we're perfect drivers and keep going forever, but obviously not.
At the age of 70, anyone driving has to reapply for their licence every 3 years. But it's a self-certifying system, and one that allowed motorists like Dr. Waddell to continue to drive. When Julian Langdon's 90-year-old father started having car accidents, she felt like she had a responsibility as a family member to stop him from driving.
He regarded any other car on the road as an invitation to overtake. He completely disregarded speed limits, and he thought policemen were young boys who didn't know what they were doing and should be out catching criminals. And when you said to him, "What about that accident with the lamppost on the bypass?" he would say, "Oh, that's ridiculous, they just forgot to put the light on," or whatever. I don't know why he hit the lamppost, but he had hit a lamppost. He'd also beaten up about 4 of the neighbours' cars in the car park of the block of flats he and my mother lived in. And the family just got very anxious and thought we should stop him driving before he killed someone, and possibly our mother.
Concerned, Julia decided to take direct action.
I contacted the DVLA. They said if the doctor says he can go on driving, he can go on driving. And I said, but he's dangerous. And they said, but you're infringing his human rights.
PACS, the Parliamentary Advisory Council for Transport Safety, recently published a paper looking into how to keep elderly people safe on the road. One of their recommendations was that GPs should play more of an integral part in the system.
If you think that they are not physically able to drive a car, you should ask them whether they are still driving, because it's a key role that you have as a health professional to help save lives of others as well as the life that's in front of you. But it's very hard because it's requiring the doctor to think, should I sentence this person to a life behind their front door, unable to get out?
PACT is recommending a national driving assessment scheme. At the moment, appraisals exist but differ from county to county. 83-year-old Dennis Hilditch from Southampton is worried about his driving as he grows older.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about it because I don't know what I would do without a car. It seems almost impossible to imagine, but it will happen in due course.
How long have you been driving for?
Motorcycles from the time I was 17. I'm now 83, work that out, do your own maths.
Do you worry about him driving? Is he a good driver?
Very, yes. I don't look for the pedal on my side.
Morning, Dennis.
Morning.
I'm Bob.
Today, Dennis is taking an experienced driver's assessment run by the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents.
So at the end of your road, we'll be turning to the right. I think the present scheme certainly needs reviewing. It relies on people self-certifying, GPs look at the repercussions of taking a licence off somebody. It is quite destructive to their quality of life. It is difficult, but I do think we do need to have a more robust system in place. Lots of parked vehicles, so what are you looking for along there?
And anything that moves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being your own critic isn't very good because you'll always say, yes, I'm perfectly safe. You really need somebody else to be strong enough to say, it's time you stopped. But members of the family won't. They're too nice, they're too kind. And so they keep on driving.
And what can you see happening ahead?
Watching the lady with the pram.
Yeah.
Stop lights up ahead.
That's it.
Some sort of a hold-up.
So how was it then?
Made some mistakes.
Really? Not as confident now?
No, not quite as good as it should be.
Moment of truth then, how did he do?
He's been a bit hard on himself. There were a few things that I would need to point out to him, but overall, he gives the impression that he is an experienced driver, but more importantly, that he's conscious of the need to take account of other road users in busy traffic.
It's hoped the recommendations by Pacts for a nationwide driving assessment scheme should help older people like Dennis make that difficult decision of when to stop driving.
When is too old to drive, though?
When you can no longer drive. When you're no longer fit to drive is too old. Until then, you're still fit to drive. Age doesn't really come into it as far as I'm concerned.
It would be difficult to get used to, but I hope that we're wise enough to know the time when it's time to give up.
The longer we discuss it, the more publicly we discuss it, the further down the chain it will get. The problem is the automobile is a combination of two key things: autonomy, your freedom, and mobility, your right to move around.
But Patricia Cahoon is hoping that people's right to move around doesn't come at the cost of other people's lives.
I don't hold the driver who killed my son responsible for my son's death. It is the system, because it's the system that allowed him to continue driving.
The sadness of the whole thing, that my father, a very well-respected GP in Wales, should end his days actually taking life. And he is deeply sorry what's happened, I know that. And, I must pass the Waddell's family condolences to the Colquhoun family. It's terrible what they must have been through.
My sons always came for dinner on a Sunday. And the last thing he said after dinner was, "Oh, thanks, Matt, it's lovely dinner. See you next week." And I said, "Yeah, okay, you take care," I said. "Love you." And he got back, "I love you too."
It's a really difficult issue. Let me know your thoughts. john.cuthill@bbc.co.uk. And you know what? There's a rumour that we're actually falling out of love with the car. But the question is, are the alternatives really up to the job? Here's Richard Westcott.
Building roads is controversial, but not building them can be controversial too. So how do the planners get it right? How do they decide where to spend our taxes, on road or rail? The only way you can ever be sure is to beam yourself into the future. And we all know how easy that is. When these fans were watching their favourite series back in the 60s, we thought we knew how we'd be travelling by 2012.
There was talk of having a little personal car that flew.
But sci-fi got it wrong. Most of us get around now the same way we did 50 years ago. Having your own jetpack remains a distant dream. And ever since I can remember, we've assumed that traffic's just going to get worse and worse. After all, we really love our cars, don't we? Well, maybe not. I mean, whisper it, but there is a rumour going around transport circles that we are falling out of love with our four wheels. In fact, they've even given it a name, peak car. So, what is peak car? Well, just look at UK traffic growth in the 60s and 70s, when we couldn't get enough cars. But by the 90s, the trend was already slowing. And by about 2002, average mileage per person stalled.
Is the love affair with the car cooling down? What seems to be happening in very many advanced countries, including even America, is that traffic growth due to car use simply is not going ahead at the same rates that it used to.
Well, now Inside Out has been given the first piece of in-depth research into peak car in the UK, and this report is full of surprises. It shows that while some of us are driving more than ever, others are dramatically changing the way they travel. Take young men, for example. Now, when I were young, I couldn't wait to get my hands on the keys to my dad's Mark IV 1.6L T-Reg Ford Cortina with reversing lights, mind. Like a lot of young men, I saw getting my driving licence as a rite of passage, but it seems that's changing.